What's up, guys? Teddy Cornwell here. Welcome to the Underdog Talk, and there is just something about the underdog. But today we have an absolute beast on the Underdog Talk. But before we get into this interview, you know I have to give this gentleman a proper Underdog Talk introduction. Today's guest is a man of many talents. This gentleman is a licensed psychologist, keynote speaker, and author. I mean, his books have been translated into 27 languages, and his TED Talks, Why We All Need to Practice Emotional First Aid, How to Fix a Broken Heart, and my favorite, How to Turn Off Work Thoughts During Your Free Time, have been viewed over 26 million times. I mean, this gentleman writes the Dear Guy science-based advice column for TED.com and the co-host of the legendary Dear Therapist podcast. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, I am proud, honored, humbled, privileged to present the one and only Dr. Guy Winch. What is up, sir? How you doing today?
Thank you for that really great introduction. I feel I can't do better than that, so let's just end because that was such a high note.
And before we even get into this interview, I have to just say I don't know if anyone's ever told you how badass your accent is, Guy. I don't know if it's what it is, but it's just I wish I had that accent.
Yeah, Google tells me because I put my name in Google, the first thing that comes up is Guy Winch accent, and I'm like, really? Of all the things I talk about, that's what. And I get a lot of emails too, and sometimes they're disappointing. They're like, "Hey, I'm a high school teacher. I showed your TED talk to my class, and we have a question." And I'm like, "What is it? Where's your accent from?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's the question." But yeah. I was born in the UK, and I was raised in other places. I've been in the US for many years, so it's a mix, and that's what's left of it.
Wow. Well, I love it, and obviously, that is one part of who you are. The main part is a doctor who spent 9 years at the university, earning your doctorate in psychology. But would you mind talking about why you decided to pick this career path? So many go into it and it's too much for them, or it's a calling. Why did you decide this is your calling, Guy?
The thing about psychology that interested me was not severe mental illness. That never interested me, schizophrenia and those kinds of things. I mean, it's important, but that wasn't my interest. My interest was like, how can I help regular people who don't have psychiatric diagnoses or big ones in that way lead happier, more productive, healthier lives? And I came at it because I felt like psychology has been a science for over 140 years or something at this point. And public don't know much about what the science is, what the findings are. We're so much more sophisticated about our physical health than we are our emotional health. There are tools out there, we don't know them, we don't know that they even exist. So my thing was like, I want to deal with regular people and I want to bring them tools. And it started with private practice one-on-one, but then in general, my writing, talks, etc., so that people can actually use these tools, which is so important, and especially for athletes, and especially for men who might not know that, oh, this is something really useful that will actually you can implement and will actually do something in your day to day now.
And again, I always say, and I've learned from this podcast, you can be mentally, fit, or you can be physically fit, but if you're not mentally fit, then you're not activating who you really are, the full potential of you. So I think, mental health is so stigmatized in a way, I want to say.
It is stigmatized.
Obviously, I'm a big supporter of it. I suffer from mental health issues, and I'm open about it on this podcast. But I think so many people need to be more open. And Doctor, you're doing a great job, and especially with the relationship advice, because so many of us are left in the blind on something like this. And I think my first big question I want to analyze, Alfred Lord Tennyson's favorite, affirmation, it's better to have loved and lost and never have to loved at all. And after a breakup, it feels like that statement is the most silly thing in the world. But do you think it is truly better to love than never have loved at all, Doctor?
So first of all, we're social animals, and so connection is really important for us. What people don't know is that loneliness, and which is, by the way, a subjective experience. It doesn't matter how many people you have around you. It's whether you feel seen, appreciated, valued by whoever's around you. Some people who are introverts, like one person can be enough. Some people, they need more. But it's a matter of your subjective feeling of connection. If you don't have that chronically, It has the same impact on your physical health and your longevity as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That's a stat a lot of people know, and most people don't. In other words, chronic loneliness will actually kill you, and it'll make you miserable along the way. It is a huge problem that we're not talking about, but it impacts your literally your health. And so there's a lot of things like that if you don't know will really matter. So connection is important, and love is important. So yes, you want to be able to love, and love comes with risks along the way, with rejection, with hurt, with breakups. It's a risky game, but it's a really important one.
And it is a risky game. My first relationship, my friend goes, part of a relationship is knowing that it might not work out, knowing you might be hurt, and that's part of a relationship. And obviously, so many people do struggle with heartbreak or loss of the one that they thought would be there, quote unquote, forever. Now, Guy, why does it hurt so bad when the one you love walks away? It's almost like one would rather choose to be beaten up and just kicked in the dust rather than this. Why is that?
Not sure you're going to say dust there, in terms of where you're going to get kicked, but but people would prefer physical pain over emotional pain. Emotional pain is really, really difficult. What we know and what's interesting about heartbreak, romantic heartbreak, is that your brain responds to a romantic breakup the way a drug addict's brain responds to the withdrawal of heroin or cocaine, say. In other words, your brain, the withdrawal of the love is the same as getting off, going cold turkey with really addictive substances. And why that's important for people to know is it explains when that happens, why people feel A, desperate, B, they feel that nothing in life matters other than getting that person back. Because if you think of a heroin addict when they're really in withdrawal, it's natural for them to, because they're in withdrawal, to be desperate, to do anything to get a fix, to kind of, like sell their mother and steal this because they just need that fix. We have the same level of desperation when we're heartbroken, except we don't know that our brain is responding in that way. So we just think like, hey, what is wrong with me? I'm going crazy here. Why am I acting this way? But no, heartbreak is a serious thing. I mean, and it causes severe emotional pain and distress that a lot of people would be like, yeah, just like beat me up and get that out of me because that's too intolerable.
And Guy, is emotional pain that comes from heartbreak beneficial in any way? Does this make us stronger if we handle it healthy or in a healthy way?
Um, Look, is it better to not be heartbroken? Yes. But any emotional challenge we have, much like any physical challenge we have, depending on how we manage it, can increase our resilience, right? Emotional resilience doesn't come in theory, it comes from managing and surviving hardship. There's no non-hardship path to resilience. When I see the stuff behind you, a muscle won't grow unless you work it out, and it's going to hurt along the way. And it takes a while to get the muscle to grow and to become stronger and bigger. It's a constant effort. And when you stop working out, it starts shrinking again. And think of our comfort zones emotionally. If we're not pushing against them, if we're not expanding them, if we're not going through hardship and trying to manage it, then we are getting softer emotionally, much as muscles would. And so, yes, it's not the ideal way to do it to get heartbroken because that's really such a shitty experience. But hardship in general and difficult feelings and challenging feelings in general are useful for resilience if we know how to handle them, if we know how to learn from them and grow from them.
And I think it does strengthen you in now in a new relationship, looking for things and taking your time more. And but I think after a breakup, sometimes we often still love and care about that person. Obviously, this is a feeling, and we can't destroy feelings. But is that normal to care about the ones that may have left us or even hurt us?
Look, I mean, the what happens with a breakup, and this is true most of the time, is that the person doing the breaking up has been thinking about it for a while before they let the other person know. A while can be a week, a month, or 10 years. There are divorced couples who, like 10 years, one of them has been like, just, but they haven't done it yet. So therefore, the other person is finding out. If you're getting broken up with, you're finding out way after the other person has been thinking, processing. So they've done that emotional detachment, and they are in a very different place in terms of moving on than you are. You're just getting used to this idea that your relationship isn't there anymore, that that your companionship isn't there anymore, that your playmate isn't there anymore, that your soulmate isn't there anymore. And that takes a while to adapt to. You can't just stop loving somebody on a dime. So it takes a while then to recover. And we do still have a lot of positive feelings for them, as well as a bunch of negative ones after a breakup. But those mixed feelings, but there's a lot we can learn from breakups, from the relationships, from how to handle that. Again, if you learn it, and it hurts a ton along the way, but you can come out stronger and you can make your next relationship more resilient and better if you've taken the time to learn those lessons.
When I think about that, it's almost like the person who's breaking up with the person, they're already gone through what the person who just got broken up with
Right.
has been through. And I think that's why it is hard for when you're broken up with it often is sudden. It's often a snap, and you're wondering what ifs. And doctor, I know what ifs are never a good thing, but in terms of closure, is it appropriate to get closure, or is closure really needed?
Yes, closure is very, very much needed. Our brain needs to know that this is done. And closure, specifically in terms of a breakup, means that you've stopped, you know, looking backwards and analyzing everything about the relationship so you can try and understand it and stalking them on social media, and you're starting to look forward. Closure means, and this is the hard part for people, giving up on the hope that you can get them back, and just understanding that it's and accepting that it's over. And that accepting that it's over part is a real struggle for people. And it's unfortunate that it's so, because often sometimes it's very, very clearly over, except to the person who's trying to hold on to some kind of hope. But what they're holding on to is pain. What they're holding on to is a lot of pain, and they're keeping themselves stuck and idealizing the ex rather than moving forward. So, as hard as it is, the closure is really important. You have to get to a place in your brain where you're like, okay, I know it's over. I accept that. Hate it, but accept it.
It's almost like everyone else can see, that you were done wrong or it's not working out, and you're just still no, it's gonna work out. She'll come back. He'll come back. And I think that is the pain because we're grasping onto something that really won't happen. And now, speaking of this, if someone leaves you and they come back to you, can that relationship ever still really have the trust, or will it really ever work out? Is there really second chances in a relationship?
Okay, so I get this question a lot. So, and sometimes it'll happen. Like a couple, there are couples who break up a lot, and every time they break up, obviously they get back together a lot. What typically happens is this: it can only work. It can, but only. I want to be super clear. Only if both of you have been able to talk about what wasn't working in the go round previously and come up with mutual understandings of what you're going to do differently to avoid those pitfalls or to handle those situations when they do and will come up. If you have a clear mutual understanding of this is what wasn't working and this is how we're going to try do things differently, then try, and who knows? Without that understanding, what's going to happen is you're going to go through the same cycle and in a more accelerated way. And so you're going to get to that break point more quickly because you're going to go through all the same dance moves and choreography to get you there because you haven't talked about what's not working and what you need to do differently. So, yes, it could, but only under that circumstance. And that requires a lot of very clear and difficult communication between two people to come up with those things. But that's when it can and sometimes does work.
I think a lot of trust would obviously have to be rebuilt, and a lot of trust would have to be kind of gained because once someone leaves you, the trust snaps. It's what did
Right,
they do?
trust, but communication skills and being able to listen and being able to accept and admit fault on either side. I mean, it's a lot of maturity that's required there. That's why it doesn't happen that often.
100%. Now, in terms of a breakup, I know you've talked about there really is not a normal time for one to heal, but how can one heal in a healthy way over that span? How can one deal with it in a healthy and mature way of a breakup?
So first of all, when you say healthy and mature way, there's no healthy mature way in which you're not going to be really wrecked, and as to the extent that you really cared about the person, that there might be a lot of crying, a lot of demoralization, a lot of despair. Those things are natural, so I just want to accept that there's no one who can healthily, like, you know what, I'm totally heartbroken, but I can do A, B, and C, and I'll be fine tomorrow. No, it's a journey. It's a recovery, because heartbreak is a form of loss and grief. And so if you think about, if the first degree relatives or someone you really care about dies, there's nothing you can do that's going to make that less painful. You can do things to help your recovery happen more quickly and more fully, but you can't skip recovery. So I just want to be clear about that. But what you do have to understand is that it's about recovery. And when it's about recovery, you need to be intentional in how you go about it. Time heals, yes, mostly, somewhat, but there's much more you can do than just waiting it out. So, for example, you need to, if you've been in a relationship for a while, certainly if you've been living with a person, you were a we. Your identification was, what did we do this weekend? Where are we going on holiday? What are we doing for Thanksgiving? And now your whole self definition is changing from we to I back again. And so you really have to kind of do that in a thoughtful way. Like, am I going back to the me before the relationship? Or are there things that I want to reinvent? You made a lot of compromises in the relationship because you always have to. So who are the people you stopped seeing, the activities you stopped doing, the passions you stopped pursuing because the other person wasn't into them? How much of those do you want to reclaim? Your physical spaces around you, how much do you want to change them? Who's your social circle now? Who's your support system? Did they go with the ex or did they stay with you? And often men especially tend to socialize via their wives or girlfriends, and then they're left bereft because, like, I didn't cultivate my friendships, I just let her be in charge of socializing. Not always, but that tends to be the, and then they're really stuck. So, like, there's a lot of rebuilding that needs to happen, and you need to be intentional about how you go about it.
Now, Guy, I want to end this podcast because so many people are going to wonder this next question. What is the best thing after a heartbreak someone can do? And then what's the worst thing someone can do after a heartbreak?
I'm going to start with the worst because that's so easy. The worst thing is what most people tend to do, which is a lot of things. In other words, when we're heartbroken, our mind will lead us down the wrong path. Our mind will tell us to do, or our mind will go, oh, I know, it's her cousin's wedding, and I blocked her on Instagram, but let me check the cousin because I'm just curious about. And then suddenly we're seeing her at the wedding, and it's wedding photos. She wouldn't post them unless she was happy and smiling in them, even if she was not happy. And suddenly we're like, like, so we tend to stalking the ex on social media, not useful. Um, 1,000 texts in an hour, like that kind of stuff, it's not necessarily useful. So the things we shouldn't do is the following. Our goal in recovery is to minimize the stage time they get in our thoughts, period. So we want to move them out of our head rather than move them in. When you're stalking them on social media, when you're going through the pictures, when you're talking about them endlessly, I'm not talking about the first few days, but months out, you are reinforcing their presence in your thoughts all the time. You should be trying to do the opposite. So the no contact rule is the healthiest thing you can do to the extent that you can. You might have kids together, you might work together, you might be neighbors, whatever. But to the extent that you can have no contact, you are trying to get them out of your head and substitute whatever else you need to in there instead of them. So that's an important thing to do. And as soon as you feel like you're able to start dating again, that really helps, because what we often miss in a breakup is not the person, but the relationship. The fact that we were in a relationship and we're thinking back to the most recent person we had that with, it's them, so we miss them. But it's not just them, it's all the trappings of a relationship, all the things we get, the companionship, the company, all of that stuff. So that doesn't have to be them. So the sooner you can, and people say to me, like, how do I know if I'm ready? And here's my dirty, quick and dirty criteria for that. If you can get through a date without crying or throwing up, um, you might be ready. I don't know. In other words, you don't have to feel totally ready. You just have to feel remotely interested in someone else and pursue that, because that can help replace that association of the last person you're in a relationship with.
I love it. And I've learned my personal lesson: do not stalk them because the pain is just going to come back. And it's it's not a good pain to
And
stop.
it's going to be a real impulse. And again, what we're trying to do is get a fix, right? Because we're addicted, and so we're trying to, but it's not useful. So we need that discipline.
And I think my final question is, when the person is begging for the person back, oftentimes I've heard that the person who is getting begged to, this is a turnoff to them. Why do they not want someone begging for them back? Why is that a turnoff?
Well, because when what heartbreak does is it really breaks us down. So we might be proud, very good people, but if that proud person is groveling, groveling is not attractive. Begging is, I don't know many people who go like, begging, what a turn on. It's just not. uh Number one. And number two, that person has already moved on in the vast majority of cases, and so it's just going to make them feel, rather than compassion, pity, perhaps. And you don't want to be pitied. That's certainly not a turn on. And also, take the hint. If they're saying no, stop begging. It's no.
And I mean, that is the cold hard truth. And doctor, I do want to know what is the best thing or some things that people can do during a heartbreak instead of just sitting in bed and crying and eating ice cream. Even though it is good, I've heard it is good to have a few days to relax, watch TV, eat ice cream. But how can someone pick themselves back in a healthy way?
So that's what I'm saying. Like, you need to be thoughtful about the rebuild. You need to start asking yourself, what do I take from this relationship? How am I defining myself? Who are the people that I can reach out to that I lost touch with? What are the things that I was interested in that I want to pursue again? And which ones do I don't need to pursue again? And what things did I learn in the relationship that I might want to pursue those? These are all very active, intentional questions. How do I redecorate my room so it doesn't remind me of him or her, et cetera, et cetera? How do I, reformulate my village around me, my community, my tribe? I need to feel connected socially. What do I need to do that? How do I, get rid of all these pictures and stop unfollowing and do all this stuff to get them out of my space? How do I, create a dating profile on an app so that I can start even just looking to, you won't know if you're interested until there are options. And so create a dating profile, see what comes your way. Maybe if all of it is like, you're not ready. But if suddenly you see a picture and you're like, well, actually, maybe you are. And so, again, be thoughtful, be intentional.
I mean, Guy, it has been an honor and a privilege. So many people need to hear this. Now, before we go, is there anything you want to plug? Where can we find your books? Because my book is coming in the mail. I'm so excited. But where can we find your content? Your social media, obviously your podcast. Where can we find all this, Doctor?
All of it could be found at guywinch.com, GUYWINCH.com. You'll have links to my TED Talks, to the books, to the podcast. One thing about the podcast, it's live therapy sessions. And so the whole point of it is that we wanted to democratize, because people don't know what happens behind closed doors. I don't know what other therapists do. They're doing it behind a closed door. They can tell me, is that what actually happened? I don't know. So people have no idea how therapy works. Is it different than talking to a friend? In what way? So my co-host and I, we both advice columnists, we choose a letter each week, and then we don't discuss it. And what happens is we'll read the letter to one another, then we'll bring in the person and do a live therapy session with them. And 9 times out of 10, if the letter was about A, the session turns out being about B or about C, because that's how therapy works. You're coming in about this, but if you go into the history, it turns out it's about that. And so you'll hear the live therapy at the end of the session. We give them actionable advice they have to do within a week. And then we hear back from them about what happened and how it went. And it's multi-part things. And then we analyze that as therapists. And so you'll be fly on the wall to hear how therapists talk about a case, how the therapy goes, what happens afterwards, and what our concluding thoughts are in each episode. So what we hear is that, and what I think is true is that whatever episode you listen to, you'll learn something about yourself from hearing it, because it really is about psychology and about the mind. So we're doing it because we really want people to get educated in the way that we need to, and we think it's a great vehicle to do that. So it's called Dear Therapists, and you can get it wherever you get your podcasts.
I mean, guys, please go check that out. I personally will be listening to that on my car ride. And first person to get one of Guy's books, I will send you the other book that you didn't get. Actually, I know you have a few, so I'll send your second choice of the books to you. I mean, just wonderful books. Guy, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. I mean, guys, please just check out Guy's content in general. So much advice, so much emotional needs that we really need as human beings to learn about. Guys, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on this video. Until next time, guys, Underdog out.